Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, The Pandemic's Impact on Our Job Market. And this is a very interesting webinar that we've been organizing for a while to bring for you some numbers about the local job market for the Waterloo region and also Guelph Wellington County. This is a webinar promoted, organized by Lutherwood, a not-for-profit based in Waterloo region, and also with an office in Guelph. For those that are not familiar with Lutherwood, we are an employment agency. So if you are looking for support, if you need help to find a job, secure employment, especially now in times of this pandemic, we are here to help you. We have a website with some resources, free resources that you also can register as a client or ask for help. It's at the beemployed.ca. My name is Carlos Martins. I'm an employment specialist at Lutherwood. I have also my colleague here joining us, Polly Proenza, also an employment advisor. And today we have Charlene Hofbauer, Executive Director at the Workforce Planning Board of Waterloo, Wellington, and Dufferin, to share some numbers with us. The board actually runs some interviews with employers, local employers, and that's how we have those numbers. So they're fresh numbers and will give us a picture about what's going on in the local job market. And for those that are looking for a job, I think it will be a really interesting data that we're going to get today. So maybe it will help you to make future decisions. Regarding the questions, if you have any questions, you can, there is an option that you can write your questions. We are going to receive those questions, and at the end, we're going to share with Charlene. And then, of course, she'll do her best to answer your questions. And this webinar also is being recorded. So at the end, if you want the link to check the webinar once again, I'll be more than glad to share with you. Charlene, now it's time for you to shine. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you. As Carlos said, I'm the Executive Director at the Workforce Planning Board of Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin. To give you a little bit more about what we do, we're a research-based organization, so we do quite a bit of research. We also do some projects. Last year we did a part-time job fair. Sometimes we're connecting with employers, as Carlos said. And we also work with the workforce itself to kind of hear what some of their concerns are around specific topics, or how they're feeling about things like the pandemic. We just ran a COVID worker impact survey in the spring to kind of get an idea of what was going on. So we do a lot of different things, and you can always check out our stuff at workforceplanningboard.com. But before I kind of get into the pandemic, I want to take a bit of a step back here, because there was something going on before we had the pandemic. You'll have to excuse me, I'm still kind of new at this one. And it's called the future of work. So there was this bigger trend happening before the pandemic hit. It involved a lot of different things. These are some of the trends that we were seeing happening before COVID hit. So we were seeing the automation of work. In Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, we know that 46% of jobs will be impacted by automation. They're not going to disappear. Don't worry on that. They're going to shift a little bit. Responsibilities are going to change. Jobs are going to look a little different. Let me give you a good example. Retail salespeople, big job that we hire across Waterloo and Wellington. Right now, a lot of those retail salespeople, help you out and then check you out. Well, with self-checkouts and automation around self-checking, those people's jobs have shifted. They're troubleshooting those self-checkouts. They're helping people. They're collecting food because you can order now online, right? And then go pick it up with curbside pickup. And I think in some cases, there's going to be the opportunity for salespeople to actually be salespeople and walk you through a personalized experience. Maybe one day we'll see concierges with Amazon to help us navigate that big, humongous retail site. So automation was happening before. Weird as it is, automation tends to speed up when we go through periods of downturns, and we're in a little bit of a downturn right now. Why? Because companies are looking to be more efficient, more productive, so they start looking at technology. Working from home and flexible workspaces was also starting to kind of happen before COVID. This is probably the trend that accelerated the most under COVID. People started letting their people work from home. They started thinking about the technology needed to work from home. And on the flip side, we had a lot of people wondering, how do you keep a work-life balance when you're working from home, especially from the dining room table and when kids were also working from home when they were doing school. So working from home was kind of something that was happening. And companies are thinking about working from home and how to keep it going. So we've probably heard that most of the tech companies are working from home till the end of the calendar year. Some professional organizations are limiting the people that stay in the office, or only allowing a certain percentage in. And others are thinking that they won't go back, most of the people won't go back at all until a vaccine is developed around for the coronavirus. So working from home has been a trend that has been accelerated under COVID. Technology and how we interact with it, another trend that's really been accelerating since COVID hit. Because now we're looking at who has access to broadband? How are we interacting with each other with technology? I don't know if anyone's been through any, but virtual interviews, having a Zoom interview, how do you do it? How is it different? As an employer myself, I went through it this summer as I hired 3 different positions. Very different experience on my end, and very different way of interacting. So how do you create that first impression when you can't walk in the door? How do you do it in a technology setting? And how do you make sure that you put your best foot forward? So these are all things that have been explored, and I'm sure Luther would have some great ideas to how to help you do that, or another employment agency out there. On the flip, on the flip side, again, how do you unplug? And we're having big conversations about whether or not internet is an essential service. The fourth trend, diversity, equality, and inclusion, is coming from a number of areas, and it was happening before COVID, and before things like Black Lives Matter, which has been going on while COVID also hit, when we started having conversations about what areas of and what communities are being harder hit than other communities. And we have a generation that's coming into the workforce that has been in fully inclusive classrooms. So they're expecting fully inclusive companies. I once read something that if you as an employer were trying to put together a diversity inclusion policy so you could attract young people, you're behind the young people because they don't even prioritize diversity inclusion because it's so ingrained in their life. So that's another trend that we saw coming along. The next 2, upskilling, reskilling, and lifelong learning, and career paths and expectations are changing, is really about skills. Employers are going to seek people who are willing to change. And I think that if you are looking at a career change, that you're really going to have to rethink if you want your employer to be in charge of your upskilling, because you may be looking at a new path, you may be looking at a new industry, and your employer may be thinking they're going to career ladder you through a series of jobs. So lifelong learning and constantly learning, whether that is a LinkedIn learning course or whether that is a Lynda course or whether that's a Conestoga College or St. Louis course. There's lots of different options out there for learning and learning new things. This also comes back to skills. As we shift and move forward to the future of work, digital skills are going to be so important. And when I say digital skills, I mean everything from being able to operate Zoom and go to and being open to any new technology that comes in and any new software, all the way through to things like coding. So digital skills are going to be very, very important. So if you are a little bit nervous when it comes to computers, it's time to really start embracing and moving forward with that technology. As well, interpersonal skills are going to be so important because we're going to have to communicate in new ways. Usually I do this presentation where I get to see you all and I get to find out if I'm connecting with you. And it's a new way to communicate, to speak to what you think is valuable. Also, teamwork is going to be huge, and so is motivation. Employers are going to want to know that you're motivated. And in order to lifelong learn, you're going to have to maintain that motivation. All this leads to talent being fluid as we move forward. There's going to be so many different paths we can move into. So why am I talking to you about the future of work? As I said, the COVID-19 crisis pandemic has accelerated this trend. When we started in January 2020, most experts felt that these trends they'd start to emerge over the next 10 years. With COVID happening, I think a lot of them were seeing 5 years out, and some were already in the middle of, and those changes are already happening. And I want to bring that to your attention so that as you're entering that work, as you keep looking for work, you can see where those changes are happening. As an employer personally, I'm already highly engaged in 2 and 3 because I have a small staff. We're shifting. We're going to be more technology based. We're going to be able to work from home. We're going to have a part-time office with everybody in and out. And I'm a small employer of 4, and I'm thinking of that. So you can imagine where some of those bigger employers are in this sort of conversation. So let me tell you a bit about how that pandemic is affecting everything, and kind of keep these trends in the back of your mind, because this will go beyond the pandemic. So before the pandemic and now. So some key facts around Waterloo Region and Guelph. You can see, looking at the numbers in that chart there, that employment rates have gone up, meaning more people are looking for work in July than they were in March. March break is where we saw that hit point where most places shut down. I shut down the Tuesday of March break, and I shut down the office. That number for the unemployment rate in Guelph has actually come down from a high of almost 15%. Participation rate, let me explain that to you. Participation rate is people who are working or are looking for work. So Waterloo Region has taken a bit of a hit on people looking for work, while Guelph has actually seen the percentage of people participating in the labor market actually grow. So there's more people who are entering the workforce in Guelph. Why are we seeing some of that difference? Number one, and I'm kind of talking about the challenges below, childcare. Childcare has been a huge issue, especially, well, now, at least in July and August, it's been an issue. But before that, it was also an issue because daycares kind of stayed open, but that 5 to 12-year-old who would be in day camps or something else has had a lot of those children have had a lot of those opportunities disappear. And so some parents have had to step in and kind of step out of the workforce a little bit to take care of their children. So that's why we're seeing a bit of a drop maybe in Waterloo. RBC did report that women were at their lowest participation rate since the 1980s. And that probably, the big factor probably there that most people believe is it's childcare. We also understand the lack of experience, and sometimes that can be a challenge. And when I say lack of experience, that could be you're trying to get into a new field. It could be your youth. So you're up against more experienced candidates, and that's why you're having problems. And that can lead to dropouts as well in the labor market. There are also a lot more competition for jobs, and there are lots of people applying for jobs. As you know, when we're talking 12.9%, 13.8%, there is a lot of competition. So you really need to make sure that you're standing out and that you really are connecting with the job postings that are out there, really making sure that you're capturing how you're a fit. There are also people not participating due to health reasons at this time. A quick overview on hiring. Hiring's been really interesting because we have seen an explosion in hiring. These numbers are pulled from findyourjob.ca. It is a local job aggregator site. It's done in partnership with us, the region of Waterloo, the city of Guelph, Wellington County, and Dufferin County. So we are just gathering from 20 plus job sites, and we're putting them all here because they're all local jobs for Waterloo, Wellington, and Dufferin. And you can search by geography, job type. If you know the National Occupational Classification Code, you can search that you're looking for, you can do that. So retail salesperson or some sort of trade, they're all there, as long as there's a job for it. So you can see that in April, which was our first real month of data collection under this model, you can see there were about 22,782 jobs online across Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin among those 20 some odd job sites. So it was about 1,100 companies hiring. In just 4 months, we're now almost at 9,000 job postings across Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin, and 3,500 companies hiring. And I want to also point out that a job posting doesn't just mean one job. That means a posting. So some of those postings, for example, with some of the bigger companies, could be for 3 or 4 jobs. So we're starting to see that employers are re-engaging. I took a really quick peek last night at what August was looking like, and we're down a bit, but it is the month, but sometimes August is a month where a lot of people take off. So we're kind of seeing that maybe it'll be a little bit behind, but it'll still be well over June's numbers at this point. And the median length of posting for a job is about 16 days. So half the jobs are under 16 days and half are over 16 days. We also look at averages. I didn't post most of the averages. I think the average length of posting is 17 days, but that varies a lot by job to job. So personal support workers tend to have longer job postings because it takes longer to find those people, versus retail sales can sometimes be as low as 14 days because more people are looking for those retail jobs. I am also getting phone calls from employers wondering where people are. So if you are exploring, there are employers out there who are definitely looking for people right now. So what was being hired and what was not? So these are things that when we started looking at the data early in the pandemic, so that March, April-ish, this is who was hiring. Healthcare. Healthcare was hiring everybody. They were afraid of losing. There's a lot of losing of people. So they want to make sure they had extra people backed up. Personal support workers, dietary aides, which usually require just a secondary. Cooks were crucial because participants, I mean, the people who were living in long-term care and hospitals, especially long-term care, were having meals delivered to their rooms when typically, like at a Chartwell or something like that, they go to a dining room. So that wasn't an option anymore. And so you suddenly needed more people to ensure that everybody got their meals. There were other occupations like cleaners, housekeepers, helpers, so they weren't quite full healthcare professionals, were being sought in long-term homes. And hospitals were being sought in screeners. We're seeking screeners. I don't know if anyone tried going to the hospital early in the pandemic, but it took you 30 to 40 minutes to get in because you had to be screened, and everybody was incredibly screened, and there was lots of questions, and you had to know where you were going, and they had to verify you were on the list. And so it took a while to get into hospitals, and screeners were one of those positions that hospitals were seeking. You also may have heard that they were graduating students early, so healthcare really needed people early in that pandemic. Transport truck and delivery drivers and warehousing jobs. The products had to keep moving. Retail stores, especially food retail, needed product on their shelves. And so warehouses were actually going overtime trying to get product out of their warehouse and into stores. I heard anecdotally that there was lots of toilet paper around when the pandemic started. It was just all sitting in warehouses and couldn't get out to locations. So warehouse people who could be shippers, receivers, and who could do material handling were so important. Transport truck drivers were still going over the border, and delivery drivers blew up because everybody started ordering food online. They started ordering from Amazon to meet their needs. There was a lot of activity, financial activity happening, and these were the people who were bringing the products to our locations. Stores. First, the food retail needed a lot of people because suddenly everybody was curbside picking up. And then as stores were allowed to open, more places started hiring. I know Lowe's has been hiring since March, or yeah, about March, April, when the government started talking about allowing them to open their greenhouses. And because they were a storefront on a street, they were allowed to open as well. Services, landscaping and cleaning are two of the big ones that keep popping up. Landscaping, luckily, could open about 3 to 4 weeks behind their usual season, and they were hiring lots of people because they didn't need to interact with the customer. They could socially distance themselves. One could be on a lawnmower, one could be weed whacking, so it was a safer job. Cleaning has also become really important early in the pandemic because everyone who opened needed to have a thorough cleaning of their environment. So that became a really big job early in the pandemic. And I'm talking early in the pandemic, that April, maybe even early May. And finally, manufacturing rebounded fairly quickly. Many of them were already talking about being reopened in May. Excellence in Manufacturing Consortium constantly connected with manufacturing to find out if they were still going, if they were not. Food manufacturing kept going because we needed food in our stores. So that was one that did not have much of a downturn unless COVID was in their facility. You probably have heard about some of the ones out in Alberta, and I don't believe anybody here in Ontario had to shut down fully, but they were allowed to reopen. They were opening quicker, and at the same time that they were opening, they were also hiring. So as we went through the different phases, you can see that more and more people were reopening, and some had to be hiring because people weren't coming back. Either they couldn't for health reasons. We talked about the childcare reason. Some people decided to take CERB. So I'm going to warn you, if we go into a second wave, these are probably the industries that will still be going. Because if we go into a second wave and we have to shut down again, we're still going to need healthcare. We're still going to need food. We're potentially still need cleaning, and landscaping will move to snow removal. And you can socially distance doing snow removal. So where did we see some job losses, some kind of shutting down of industries? Anything tourism related. Golf courses and some others did eventually reopen. They were behind on their season, but most tourism related things shut down. Not even all hotels are currently reopened, despite the fact that you can socially distance. Arts and cultural jobs shut down because most of them are connected to being attractions. So they tend to shut down, and all those music festivals and multicultural festivals we love, some of those have people behind them who organize them. And so they tended to kind of be wandering around, wondering what to do. And entertainment, bowling lanes, big concerts were gone. So it was a very different feel for those people. And TIAO, which is a tourism organization, did a lot of research into the tourism related jobs and what was not reopening and what was opening and how employers were dealing with it. So if you are interested, I strongly recommend that you go to TIAO and look up some of their pandemic stuff, if that's your area of interest, tourism. So where were the jobs in July? The top 5 locations were urban. Kitchener had the most postings, followed by Guelph, Cambridge, Waterloo, Orangeville, which kind of fits with the size of the communities. The top rural were Centre Wellington, which includes Elora and Fergus, Woolwich, which is like Elmira, St. Jacobs, North Dumfries, which is Ayr and Roseville, I think, and then Wellington North, which is Mount Forest and Arthur. The rural ones are not necessarily connected by population. So it's interesting how those jobs they're areas that are hiring right now. Their employers need people. As well, 88% of the jobs in July were full-time, 86% were permanent. So people are hiring full-time permanent, a lot of employers that we found postings for. What kind of skills, what kind of education are they looking for? So most of them, or over half of them, I guess, or close to half, are requiring a university, college, or apprenticeship, some form of post-secondary education. But at the same time, almost half again are requiring that high school or occupation-specific training. So when we think about the transport truck driver, that they would fall in there. And then 1,349 needed only on-the-job training. So it didn't necessarily require a high school, but high school was okay. And then on-the-job training was what would happen after that. What was being hired in July? What everybody wants to know. So this is our top 10. So I'm going to ask you, does it look kind of familiar? Because I've been talking to you about who was hiring earlier. Healthcare jobs, manufacturing jobs, retail jobs, warehousing jobs, cooks. When I say cooks, a lot of food, and you see restaurants are starting to reopen. They're opening their patios. They're exploring opening inside. So cooks are restaurant, but they're also healthcare because healthcare requires a lot of cooks as well. The cleaners, the delivery and courier service drivers, and construction has fully reopened. I'm having to drive on the 401 once in a while, and definitely construction is back. So, and also all of the houses going up. So construction's having a bit of a renaissance as well, and is still a going industry. So these ones will, even if we go through a shutdown, a lot of these ones are still going to be in demand come October, November, if we do go into a second shutdown and do enter a second wave. So that's where the opportunities were in July. There's not a lot of variability from the beginning of the pandemic to now, actually, and who's being hired. So just to give you that heads up, but these ones right now seem to be where the demand is and where employers are hiring. So you're probably going to ask me who was hiring, so I'm happy to tell you. Lowe's, Grand River Hospital. This is for all of Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin. So again, retail is still key in hiring locally. The hospital is also key. The finance, you see Sun Life is on there. They were a big hirer before the pandemic as well. So finance is still going strong. These numbers do represent the number of postings. So again, there may be more jobs with these companies beyond the number you see there. I also want to point out that we had 5 placement agencies amidst all these companies. I didn't put them up. If you want to see which ones they are, you can go to findyourjob.ca. You can click the job demand report, and it's an interactive report, and they can show you those. I think actually in July, Randstad was actually the largest employer. So they were doing a lot of hiring, permanent full-time hiring and contract hiring for employers in the Waterloo, Wellington area. So there's even more jobs than I've got listed here. So in some cases, those placement agencies are an introduction to a company, or like I said, maybe a permanent position as well. The top 50 companies, I kind of looked it down and tried to figure out what industries they were in to help you a little bit more. So 14 companies were retail and wholesale. So one was car sales, because car sales is a retail company. Most of them were like the Lowe's and the Walmarts of the world. But car sales popped up, as well as food distribution / wholesalers. So it's somebody who gets the food and then sells it to restaurants and other institutions. So those were kind of the 2 unique ones that were in there, but 14 of the companies would be classified as retail and wholesale. In the top 50, we had 12 placement agencies. So employers are looking for placement agencies to find people. 9 were healthcare, pretty much long-term care and hospitals. There was 1 that was an at-home care. So just to give you that heads up, that long-term care right now in hospital are still needing people. So if you're thinking of retraining, you might want to consider that. The companies, there were a few industries that had 2 companies. So finance and insurance had 2. Admin and support, and when I say admin and support, one's a contact center and one's a security firm. That's what admin and support includes. Manufacturers, there were 2 companies in the top 50, and public admin had 2 companies in the top 50. The number of industries that had 1 company in the top 50, there was a construction company. There was a leasing and rental company, which was leasing trucks for like moving, things like that. Arts, entertainment, and recreation. Information and cultural, that was an IT company. Professional, scientific, and technical was a marketing agency. And market research is what they did. Education was in there, and food accommodation was in there as well. So food and accommodation is starting to hire because sometimes people can't come back, even though they've had a bit of a hit recently. So just to tell you how you get to fish, I kind of told you, but if you go to findyourjob.ca, there's a job demand report on the right side. You click the interactive, you go in there and you look by whatever it is that you want to look by. Or you can just go through the pages and look at it once and then figure out how you want to see the information. Every employer that advertises a posting that month is in that report. You just kind of have to scroll through the companies. Every job that is hired in that month is in that report. So you can even pull by the type of job you're looking for and just see who, you can even see who was hiring exactly for that job. So within the past month, which may give you an opportunity to do some cold calling or may help you work with your employment counselor to figure out how to connect with them. The new report is up for the previous month. So August report will probably be up about September 4th, if all goes well. And so we'll start to see those August numbers rolling in next week. I want to give you that heads up as well, because if you are on a job search, you may want to see who's recently hired or who's posted, because even if they haven't, even if they've posted, they may not have hired. And that's an important thing to keep in mind, that just because they posted doesn't mean they filled the position exactly. So it never hurts to do that outreach to them and work with your employment counselor or a job developer to figure out how to use some of this data to help you find your next opportunity. So that is all for me speaking. I really would like your questions. So I'm willing to take questions if you have any.
Thank you very much, Erlene. Let me get back here. So, thank you very much for the presentation. I think the numbers are really interesting to we learn, as I said, for those right now looking for a job and trying to figure out what to do. I recently got the news, for example, of a very popular, let's say, place that shut down recently in downtown Kitchener. Rhapsody, I think is the name. And you were talking about the entertainment and all those things. So, like after years operating, they had to shut down, and all the businesses in uptown Waterloo as well, like that they kind of required to be busy. They are trying to either figure out what they can do, or they're just shutting down because like there is no perspective that things will get better anytime soon for those type of industries. So I have a question for you. While you were talking, I was reading an article here about the flights arriving, I don't know how many, but with the people infected with COVID, flights arriving in Canada. And you're talking about second wave, and people are saying that there is no doubt that we will go through a second wave soon, especially when winter comes. So my question for you is, do you see any if you could list maybe three, I don't know, skills or experience, let's say, that people must have in considering this new situation now that we have, where people are working from home, or where people might have to go to the office or to whatever they do. And what kind of skills do you see? I remember talking about this with someone saying that people are buying a lot online, right? Like right now. And especially ordering food, for example, as you said, people are hiring cooks and all those things. It doesn't mean that people are going back to the restaurants, but because they're ordering to eat at home, for example. So what are the skills that you could list that could be the top three, let's say, important for those that want to be in a stable situation where no matter if COVID's there or not, they'll be okay with that?
I think right now the biggest skills are communication. And when I say communication, I mean on so many levels. I'm kind of including customer service in this one because it can go that broad. Communication's a really weird one. I think communication skills are valid because we're having to communicate in new ways, and we need to get our messages across nice and clearly. especially when we're sending messages via Teams or Slack or something like that. You know, you don't want to leave room for interpretation. You want to be to the point, clear and concise. Sarcasm doesn't work over Teams, whereas it might work around the water cooler. So being aware of that and how to communicate effectively for the environment that you're in. And that goes for on the floor as well. So I think that's one really, really important skill. Interpersonal / teamwork skills. We keep hearing we're all in this together, and I think in a way we are. So there's been a lot of campaigns around be kind and think of what you say, and I think that, as weird as it sounds, it transfers to the work environment as well. Being patient with people, knowing when someone's overstressed, overwhelmed, reaching out to them, being that person who is willing to be that team player. Let's take that example of cooks. With all the cooks that are in healthcare and are in restaurants, they probably have to be a little bit more patient with each other because they could have a patio open and they could have an out the door, skip the dishes, Uber Eats drops in, then people doing curbside pickups as well. So, they've got to be a little bit patient with each other, maybe more so than they used to have to be. But I think that's something that I'm hoping that after the pandemic will continue. And I think employers really looking for people to be motivated, to be willing to look at what's going on and to find a way to stay engaged in the job, to stay on the job, to connect with their employer, especially as they start working from home, or if they're working on here, like in retail or something like that. I think those are skills that employers are going to be looking for now, and it's going to continue beyond that. It seems to be the 3 skills I think that we're really all looking for. And if I can add a 4th, open to change. And I think we saw that early in the pandemic where policies changed like 4 or 5 days later because what was happening changed. Coronavirus is called a novel virus. It's new. It hasn't been fully researched. And so how the virus shifts or best practices for how to cope with it, we're getting information all the time about this virus. And I think as an employer, I'm looking for somebody who, when I say, oh, this has come in and now we need to shift, I would hope my employees would go, okay, we need to shift this way because something new has come up and I'm open to that change and I'm going to be adaptable. I think those are things because as we talk about, at the beginning, I talked about the future of work. I think we're looking at the beginning of a solid 2 to 3 years of change. They're saying that even with a vaccine, we're looking at 18 months to 24 months to 3 years before things go back to what we'll call a newer normal. Then right now we're in a period where it's the next normal, the next normal, the next normal. And it's going to constantly change. And being open to that and adaptable would probably be, if I can say, the 4th most important skill that you can carry into the workforce.
Great. I have a question here from Andrea. She's, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question, but she's asking, is there any opportunity for the volunteers jobs to be able to get experience in a new skill? So considering those skills that you're mentioning, if someone, and of course, this situation that you just described, that you have to be open for new opportunities. So if I wanna kind of get some hands-on experience, do you see any? What would you recommend? Like here we have a question, as I said, about volunteering. Do you think this can be also an option for those trying to switch from one field to another? And for those that want to do this type of things, do you recommend any place where they can find volunteer jobs for this purpose, maybe?
So volunteering can be a great way to take on skills. When I speaking from personal experience, when I talk about my resume, I don't assume that the only valuable things in my life or the only skill building opportunities in my life or in the life of people who I hire come from work. They do come from volunteer experiences and what you do outside of that. And those could be new opportunities to try different things. I think those are fair opportunities. And I would recommend them. If there's something you're thinking about exploring a new opportunity, that's part of your lifelong learning. And it shows you have the initiative to try something new, to take on a new skill, and to work to develop yourself. That's why I went back to sometimes we can't rely on our employers to build our skills. Sometimes we have to take that upon ourselves, and it could be through a volunteer experience. I believe there are central volunteer volunteer organizations within KW and within Guelph. I know in Guelph it's called the People and Information Network. I think opportunities are posted there if you're interested in it. I can't remember the name of it in KW. I want to say like it's Volunteer KW or something like that. But there's also Charity Village sometimes posts volunteer opportunities, and those might even be remote. So you could be volunteering potentially for an organization in Toronto, building a skill set, but you're staying at home and you're doing it maybe, you know, between 4 and 6 or something like that, 2-3 times a day. That's still valuable. You're learning how to work remotely. You're learning to be self-motivated. You're learning all these other things on top of what you're doing. You're exploring a new career path for yourself. I think volunteer experiences are going to be part of that continuous learning. I know, Carlos, you run the mentorship program. You know, that's another one that's filled with opportunity and lifelong learning, both for the mentor and the mentee. So look for every opportunity to expand those skills, and volunteering is one of those.
Okay, so I have the information here sent by Manpreet. He said that the website for Waterloo region is volunteerwr.ca in case people are in within this region. So I have another question here sent by Manpreet. He has this: can we shed some more light or info on participation rate in KW, especially the difference between KW and Guelph numbers on participation rate? It's a very technical
Okay.
question.
Yeah, it's a pretty technical question. So the participation rate. So when we looked at participation rate in February, we found between February and June, we found that 30,000 people left the workforce. They just left. They were not looking for work. From June to July, we saw 6,000 come back into the workforce. I'm not going to crystal ball, but I have a feeling with schools starting up, we may see maybe a little bit more people re-enter the workforce and decide to re-engage. We're still wondering why the difference between the Waterloo and Guelph one ourselves, I'll be honest, because Guelph has consistently had more people participating than, like, theirs was going up while Waterloo's was going down on a slight rebound. So I'm hoping I'm answering your question. So we're still exploring that. It could be because that Guelph had a higher unemployment rate much quicker. Most of those people who are participating are now are looking for work, or they're seeing opportunities somewhere, or they could be moving into the area. And that's something we're going to be digging deeper into as we continue, because this is one of the question marks I have right now. I'm thinking with Waterloo, it has been some significant job losses. And I think there may be some childcare issues. I'm not sure as well, which is something I need to explore, is how the daycare shifts between Waterloo and Guelph. Were there issues in one over the other? So those are things we are exploring at this time. If you have a follow-up question, Manpreet, I'd be happy to answer it as well.
Great. I don't have any other questions from the audience. I have a question for you, considering again the same situation. We have right now, like, well, summer is ending soon, and winter is around the corner. And so in case we get into a new wave of contamination and things like that, and consider winter, because of course the opportunities, they like when summer comes, we know that there are typical positions for summer, right? Like
Mhm.
especially entertainment. If we consider, like again, you don't have a crystal ball, but considering the numbers that you have access and everything, uh, in case we get into a second wave during the winter, what are the type of industries that you think will still, and considering the experience that we went through now, that will keep going during the winter?
I think the ones that I spoke back to when I talked about who was hiring early in the pandemic. Um, I think healthcare will still go. There's not an option on that one. Um, and I think they're going to be much more aggressive. I think they're going to be um, there were a lot of issues with healthcare if you followed the news, and especially long-term care. Um, so they're going to be looking for people. So personal support workers, dietary aides, someone to feed someone, someone to do dishes, someone to be a cook. I know this morning Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto just reported an outbreak of COVID. So if all those staff have to self-isolate, there's a lot of openings there suddenly. And it's especially true because if we stay in this sort of crisis mode with healthcare, people can only work at one facility. So we had a lot of people who were working at two facilities, and now there's a real need for staff, RPNs, dietary aides, restorative care aides, so many people needed. Um, so I would say healthcare. Number two, we're all going to have to eat. So everything that's part of that food chain is going to need people, is going to have to continue to run. So that is our food processors. That is our right on through to our retail. Some of our restaurants, they've started to shift how they're operating so they can stay in business. We have heard a lot in Toronto that have closed because they couldn't shift for whatever reason. Maybe it wasn't profitable, maybe it wasn't possible. Um, I've kind of talked to the Waterloo BIA, and they feel that a lot of their restaurants are going, have shifted, and are thinking about new ways to operate. So I think that one. And with that comes the warehousing, the delivery drivers, the transport truck drivers, all going to be still needed because we have to get food to everybody. Stores, that might stay, it might not, depends. I I don't know about anybody else, but I have found that I'm in love with curbside pickups. I'm picking up one or two things. I just have somebody else take care of it, and I don't have to go into the store. So some stores have learned to shift. Manufacturing will probably find a way to keep going because we still have need for things that are manufactured. I mentioned food, but Toyota didn't take a lot of downtime for Toyota to continue. And it will also depend. I'm going to say some of this. Manufacturing is also dependent on what happens elsewhere because we have so much manufacturing that flows in and out of our country. So, if China shuts down, that creates a new wrinkle in all of this. And I just want to put that little asterisk on there and that little star to think about. Um, and I've heard it's going to be a really snowy winter. So snow removal is still going to be a big thing because we're still going to have to go out uh, for some things. So those are some of the ones that on the top of my head. Tech will still run. Finance will still run because they're running from home. So if there's any sort of job that can be done from home, those ones will still run. Um, I'm a small nonprofit. We were still running. In fact, I think we were busier during in the early stages of the pandemic than we've ever been. So there are some that are going to be busier, and you just kind of look at them and go, would that affect them? And so education will probably be, they're already affected right now. I know that. And because they're hiring more custodians right now. They're looking for more supply teachers, more other other positions as well. But if the schools shut down, what does that look like, and how does that all happen? The colleges and universities, have pretty much gone online. So some of those in-person things aren't happening at the same rate they used to. So if I had to give it those ones I spoke early in the pandemic, and then I would add maybe into that anything that can probably continue to operate from home in that home-based environment. So engineering firms will be fine. They still need to put in requests for proposals, and projects need to move ahead. Construction could go either way, because they did do a bit of a shutdown on construction, but I think a lot of construction firms have reshifted, making sure they have properly sanitized facilities and things like that. So maybe they wouldn't go down this time. It's a lot of crystal balling and guessing. But based upon where we were earlier in the pandemic, I think that those would be the industries I would be most confident in saying they're probably still going to be operating. Some of them will still be hiring for sure.
Yeah, and recently we had the announcement that Amazon is also uh, opening a big facility here. Apparently, like they're going to be hiring hundreds of people. So that's good news for Waterloo region and probably Guelph as well. Like it's not that
Mm-hmm.
far. I think they're considering Maple Grove, that
Yes.
area, as
Yes.
the area that they're going to establish their warehouse. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it will be this is good news for the region, right?
Yes. So
Uh,
Amazon early in the pandemic did a lot of hiring, actually. Like they hired big chunks of people every other week. And so, yes, there's the warehouse, the order picker, all that. And then there's all the people who are delivering. So there's potential for a lot of jobs there just beyond the warehouse.
okay, Paulie, do you have any questions?
No, we haven't had any overs, and I was going to ask something about working from home, but I think Charlene already provided some examples, because we do often get asked that question about people that are looking for options specifically working from home. So I think that was very useful. The idea is to provide it about maybe construction firms or engineering firms that may still need have projects ongoingly and need someone to work from home. And you also mentioned how that was already something that was considered by employers and employees, the flexibility to work from home in the future of work.
Yeah.
So we do see a lot of people often asking that question about what are the options when a lot of the postings seem to be more frontline type of services. What might be some of the recommendations for people that may want to work from home or look for opportunities exclusively of working from home? And I think we provided some good examples about that. So thank you.
I think a lot of the job boards now, that's an option. You can just look at the remote, you can just look at the work from home options. Actually, I think there's that opportunity as well. So I know when I hired this summer, I did let people know that they would be working from home a certain amount of the time. So yeah, it's out there, but some jobs just cannot be work from home type of jobs.
For sure. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I saw the other day on LinkedIn, kind of a joke saying, "Who brought innovation to your organization this year?" Option A, the CEO. Option B, a consulting firm. Option C was COVID-19. So as you said, like COVID kind of pushed us, like the trends that we already had, like working remotely and things like that, or even like Teams, for example. We had implemented Teams at Lutherwood, luckily, before the pandemic, and then all of a sudden everybody had to learn how to use it, and it's a lifesaver right now. Like that's the way we are conducting our work. But yeah. So Charlene, if you, do you have anything else that you want to comment?
I don't think so. I think I've covered a lot of ground. If there are any questions you get afterwards, Carlos or Polly, just send them my way. I'm happy to answer them. And thank you very much for inviting me here today.
Great. So, Charlene, thank you so much for sharing, all this information, your perspective on the local job market. Hopefully, it was informative for the audience. I'm sure it was. And just a piece of information, on September the 9th, we are going to have another webinar that is basically 5 tips on how to use video for interviewing and things like that. So it will be really cool. So if you haven't registered, we'll be promoting this webinar soon. I think next week we'll be promoting this webinar. But if you go to lutherwood.ca/webinars, it's already available. You can go there and register for this webinar that will happen on September the 9th. Same time, 9:30 as well. So thank you very much all for coming, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.